We live in a world where crossovers are king of the ring, but that doesn't mean that sedans have completely tapped out, especially not in the compact category, which is exactly where you'll find this 2026 Nissan Sentra. But it's not just competing against those other cars in its class, it's also competing against those compact and subcompact crossovers, where sedans, I think, have a distinct advantage: driving dynamics and styling. Today we're outside Phoenix, Arizona for our first drive of this Sentra. We're gonna get it out on the road to give you a look around and talk about some of the changes inside and outside, what it's got under the hood, but I will give you a sneak peek. I absolutely love the way this thing looks. I don't just like the way this looks because it happens to be matching my outfit, but we are in a similar wavelength because Nissan is looking at black as a very versatile color here and implement it, in this case, for the sporty trims. This SR is going to be probably my favorite trim of the bunch, and it comes with this huge black insert in the lower grille. But when I say lower grille, I mean this thing gets really, really low. But this whole grille insert is a play on the V-motion grille that we've seen in previous generations, but in this case, it's much more integrated than pronounced. We have the V shape coming out of the center, but it spans the entire length of this front end. And here in black, it makes it seem incredibly large. If you want something a little bit more subtle, you can go with the SL. That's gonna be more premium look, and it's gonna have more body color integrated into it, but you won't be able to get this blue. That's gonna be exclusive for the sporty model. And if you're looking at the lower end trims, they'll have a similar V design, but you'll get more regular plastic than the shiny black, and probably a little bit more balance than you find on either the SR or the SL. But no matter what trim you get, you're gonna get LED lighting. These are new projector headlights, so not only are things gonna be a little bit better illuminated, but they also look really nice when they're turned on. And if you get the top end trims, you also get signature lighting. That's not just here in the front, but also in the rear. And that means that when you walk up to your vehicle, it'll greet you with a cool little light pattern, something you generally find on some more expensive vehicles, but nice to see a little bit of personality coming forward in this Sentra. This is certainly the raciest version of the Sentra that I've ever seen, but a lot of it has to do with the SR trim specifically. And the standout for me is gonna be the two-tone paint. Black roof is gonna be the option for whatever color you end up going with on the SR, but it's also gonna match the rest of the points around the vehicle. That's gonna lower the visual eye line, but also stand out and, I don't know, make everything seem a little bit stronger, a little bit sharper. It feels like, especially with this chrome strip that runs front to back along the outside of the window, that this is stepped up into a new division. It feels like if you're in a game, you've leveled up, this is that next level. And while that chrome strip is gonna be here on all the other Sentras, things like that spoiler and the side skirt certainly are not. Neither are these particular wheels. If you're looking for a racy look and one that's still fairly sophisticated and not total boy racer, I think this one is pretty much nail on the head. It's about 183.3 inches, coming in a little longer than last year's model, but it feels like maybe it just stretched it out. And if we're going up with the level up theme, maybe that's jumping into puberty and really finding yourself and getting stretched out and lean, but so far, not a bad thing. For wheels and tires, you're looking at a 16, 17, or 18-inch wheel, although the 18 is exclusive to the SR and the 17 to the SL. This 18-inch wheel is actually an accessory, I believe, about $800, but the way it looks is probably worth it. You'll also get wider tires on those top two trims, 215 versus 205s. And with the 17-inch wheel, that might be my favorite with a little bit more sidewall and the same overall width, though you'll save a little bit of money in fuel when you go with the S or the SV with those 205 width tires. I always have to be a little bit careful when talking about back ends, but I don't get to talk about them in crossovers very much, mostly sedans. And in this case, it's a good looking one, especially in the SR trim that gets the extra goodies like the spoiler, like the different rear bumper, which has sort of a diffuser inspired look, but mostly inspirational, probably not so much functional. But no matter which one you get the same sort of LED lighting, at least outside the trunk area, because if you get the top end trims like SR and SL, you'll also get the signature lighting built into it, which does seem to enhance the experience. On this end, it feels a little sportier, but somehow on the SL, even though it's pretty much the same lighting, it does seem to just elevate the experience. But it's not just about looks here. They've also made some functional changes, and that mostly happens when you open up the trunk. It's about 14 cubic feet of storage capacity, which not bad, all things considered. I've got my luggage in here without much issue, but actually the bigger issue is loading them in and out, which is done very, very simply, because this is one of the lowest load heights you'll find in any vehicle out there. And that means that you don't have to lift things very high to get them in. And when you do have something larger, you don't have to be as, I know, maybe technically specific with it, because we've also made this opening a little bit wider. So loading things in and out has just been made easier. If you have a very large item, go ahead and pull on the tab here. That'll go ahead and allow you to fold your second row down. And that means the pass-through that was there has been also expanded, so you can fit larger items more easily. Nissan says you can fit up to a 55-inch television all the way through, and maybe you don't need to do that every week, but it's nice to know you can if you need to. One downside though, if we lift up this lower load floor, you'll find not a spare tire, but instead a foam insert that suspiciously is roughly circular shape, and there is a peg in there. I suspect if someone wanted to, they could go ahead and get a spare tire, have it loaded and mounted in there, although obviously you would lose a bit of additional storage space if you wanted to tuck things like emergency blankets, flares, or my favorite, emergency snacks. All new isn't always better, and one thing unchanged from last generation is going to be what's under the hood. This is the same 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, making about 149 horsepower and just about 146 pound-feet of torque, mated to a CVT. Obviously, this is a front-wheel drive configuration, though that CVT has been refined for, I guess, a little bit better connectivity between driver and the vehicle itself. It will go ahead and pretend to shift in different scenarios. It also has a new sport mode to go ahead and tighten up things like throttle response, and obviously an eco mode if you're trying to save a few pennies at the pump. From this configuration, you can expect either 33 or 32 miles per gallon, 32 miles per gallon if you go with the wider tire SR and SL, and save a few pennies, like I said, on that 33 miles per gallon if you go with the 205 width tire S and SV models. While it's not uncommon to find a turbocharged engine under the hood these days, those are a little bit more complex and end up being a little bit more spendy. They may be a little bit more powerful or fuel efficient or some combination of the bunch, but this, where it sits, is, by the way, not the least powerful engine of its kind. And if you're not trying to go faster without a sporty or more performance-oriented vehicle, then I say save a few bucks and go ahead and drop a few ponies. One reason people have gone away from sedans is because they feel like they just want more room up front, but let me tell you, there is a ton of space up here. Nissan says this has some of the largest legroom figures in the entire category, and I have to agree with them. If I put this seat all the way back, well, it's back farther than I'd be comfortable with, and I'm 6 feet tall. I can technically still touch the pedals, but it's not where I would want to be. But with this seat set for myself, which means cushion all the way down, I still have probably 3 or so odd inches of headroom, which in other vehicles, specifically something like the K4, wasn't really the case. So this feels actually pretty nice and roomy. And when it comes to this seat, it's a 6-way power adjustment. You'll never be able to do power adjustment over there on the passenger side, but sitting over there felt pretty comfortable too. I just know that I can get where I want to be, and we even have 4-way adjustable lumbar. I think I might actually sacrifice the adjustment for the lower cushion, whether you want to tilt or untilt that, so I can go ahead and get 4-way adjustable lumbar, but that's not something you get on, well, there's a long list of vehicles that don't do 4-way adjustable lumbar. And if you want to adjust the steering wheel, that's going to be a manual adjustment, up, down, back and forth. There is a lot of room here to make sure you're comfortable. And just for reference, I shared this car today with someone who's probably about 5'4", and we were both pretty comfortable. So that's not only working for one, but it's a pretty wide range. And in the back seat, as I expected, things changed just a little bit. I still have legroom, probably about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, depending on how you want to look at it. Though it does feel like I sit pretty high in this seat, and there's a lot of room under my thighs without much support. But the obvious one is that, well, it probably looks like I am in the roof, and that's probably because it's true. Let me slide on over. There is a hump here in the center, but with this seat all the way back, which honestly isn't that much farther back, you can clearly see how much space I run out of. I could probably tilt my head like this, and I'd say I am at least a good 2 or 3 inches short when it comes to the rear headroom, which means your taller folks are going to need to be up front, but if they are, they'll fit just fine. Actually, the seating in the back here is pretty comfortable. Nissan says that the zero gravity seating you get up front carries over to the rear, so you get them on the outboard seats, although the person in the middle here, well, they're just gonna get a cushion, so certainly not the most comfortable seat in the house. And if you do get one of the higher end trims, you get a fold down armrest with 2 additional cup holders. Here's what I would like to see instead. A big downside of the back seat is that you are going to be set for whatever temperature the drivers have set for you and whatever air they're willing to share, because there are no vents back here at all. And where in a lot of vehicles we see 2 charge ports, there's only 1. That one I can understand, but the lack of airflow back here is one that I think I have a bit of an issue with. Now today, on a day like this, where it is nice and warm out in Phoenix, I certainly wouldn't mind having a little bit of airflow. I've moved over from the SR to the SL, borrowed that from a colleague, so that we can go ahead and take a look at the interior with a little bit lighter touch than we find on the SR. As you would expect on a sporty trim, you get a lot of black and red accents. In this case though, my favorite way to get this is going to be in this cream sort of look mixed with the blue. And there is a lot of great detail here. As you can see in the seat, it's a stitched diamond design. It's not perforated, no ventilation here, but of course you can get heated front seats. This seat material is tailor fit, which is what they call their synthetic leather. Up in the door panel, you can also see, hopefully it's coming through, that the blue is up there up top, then you get the beige, and then black inserts where honestly we would expect them, but those are in places that are less visible to the eye. Obviously everything down here is going to be black because this is what's going to take the most beating and be the one working hardest for you. That's why the lighter touch comes in the areas that not only will you touch, but that you'll see and appreciate a little bit more. I do have to call out a nice little addition here. There is sort of a brush finish look there around the window switches and the locks. That's a nice way to make this feel a lot more upscale than the price tag ultimately says. Now up on the dashboard, I'll take a quick look at this design because one thing I really dislike about large screens is when they're just simply plastered into the interior rather than actually integrated. And in this case, these look like they belong here. And the dash design, even though it might seem a little bit tall here on camera, actually sits a good ways below your line of sight, meaning none of this feels very obstructing. I don't want to get too far because we do have a nice finish touch here on this plastic component. We have some nice stitching here in the blue. This again is going to be that tailor fit material. You can also get that on the SR trim if you get the upgrade package. You can see there our glove box has quite a bit of room, not just for the literature for this vehicle, but also a stack of pricing information. Don't worry, that will come later. Now let's move on to those screens because there are two 12.3 inch screens here, and that's a lot of screen real estate in a vehicle of this size. But it's set up, as you can see, so that from the driver's point of view, the dead zone between them doesn't really need to contain any information. There are some vehicles that have it. I never felt like it was totally necessary. You'll always get a 12.3 inch over here on the infotainment screen, but on the S trim, this will be a 7-inch screen rather than 12.3. One of the reasons I suggest that SV and above. But if we go into this infotainment screen, not only is it easy to read, but also using Nissan's latest software. So the icons aren't only attractive, but honestly pretty useful. And getting in and accessing this happens pretty quickly. You can also go ahead and add some of these different widgets. So your home screen looks like whatever you want it to. You can wire in from S and above, but SV and above will have wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay. Chances are you're going to have your own music navigation, whatever else you want up there on this screen. And it's going to be much easier to do so when it's just a little bit bigger. Dropping below that, we'll find some silver accents to the left and right. Those are going to be your vents, nice and manual functions. In the center here, what kind of looks like a vent is actually going to be a button bank, in this case to access your cameras, volume up and down, that's going to be a knob, buttons for your track forward and backward, and then of course your hazard lights. And then below that, what Nissan says is going to be a class exclusive haptic HVAC control system is maybe not my favorite. I'm someone who wants to set the temperature once and then click this little icon right here. So for me, having haptics that look better doesn't bother me, but for some folks who like to get pretty fiddly with their climate controls, this one might be a little bit annoying. You will have to go ahead and look to see, more likely than not, which button you're pressing. It'll go ahead and flash up here. As you can see, I'll go ahead and raise the temperature or lower the temperature. You can see that happening on the bottom strip there of the dash. And if you want to activate your heated seats, that's going to be on the left side. Heated front seats on this model, and it's 3 different levels of heating. Let's keep working our way down where we'll find our power. In this case, we have 2 USB-C ports and a Qi wireless charging mat. That is going to be a Galaxy Ultra phone. It does fit, but just barely, so just know if things get much bigger, that might end up getting a little bit tight. We also have a 12-volt power outlet right there. Our start-stop button is just off to the left here, and then we move into our shifter. This is going to be a pretty basic shifter, park, reverse, neutral, drive, and B, though B generally indicates something like a hybrid vehicle, but there is of course no hybrid engine option on that. Interesting, we don't have L. Noticeable though, there is no manual mode. This is a CVT, but it does pretend to shift, so something that you could have, but in this case, I'm fine with them leaving off. Your drive mode selector is here, standard, sport, or Eco are what's available. Auto on off function, though this operates very smoothly. One of the nicer to use stop starts that I've noticed in a while. Parking brake, and then of course your auto hold feature, which to me is an absolute luxury. And then of course we have our cup holders. These are pretty squared out. Let me move my sunglasses out of the way. So you should be able to fit slightly larger beverages, but probably not your enormous water bottle. And if you have something smaller, like a thin can, you do have some support here to keep them from wobbling around. Moving a little bit further back, we have our center armrest that does have some nice stitching along that matches not only the seats, but also somewhere in the dash. If we lift this open, we have a pretty deep storage area. Like I said, I borrowed this, so it looks like they were making use of it here, but deeper than I would have expected, but not terribly large. You could definitely fit milk in here, but maybe not a full gallon. Certainly a 2-liter bottle would be close to fitting, but whatever you want to do with your storage is up to you. And then finally, let's go ahead and take a closer look here at the driver display. Like I said, this 12.3 in this trim and all but the S, that one goes down to 7. This is configurable, so you can go ahead and pick a couple different settings and layouts and different information present. They've been driving this vehicle most of the day. It looks like they were about 33 miles per gallon. I have had this parked here that already dropped from 34. You should expect to get really good fuel economy here, and that display is nice and easy to read. And then of course we get to our steering wheel, which is an interesting two-spoke design. It basically feels like a bar going straight across here, which leaves open space above and below. But if you like to put your hand here in the center, or you've never tried putting your hand here in the center, you can finally now do so. On the left-hand side here are going to be controls for your driver assist. So this is our ProPilot assist button. Obviously speed up, slow down, control your distance, and then your volume is going to be buttons over here. On the right-hand side, those are going to be controls for the rest of your infotainment and that driver screen. So a lot of this controls the driver screen. Then of course your voice commands, track forward, backward, answer your phone, and of course go backward on everything there on that display in front of you. No paddle shifters to be found here, but that's probably for the best. Like I said, no manual shifting mode, no actual shifting, all just simulated CVT. Of course, on the right-hand side, you have controls for your wipers. On the left-hand side, controlling for the lights. In this case, normally set to auto. Just out from the steering wheel and off to the left, you'll find just a few more buttons. In this case though, it's one that you might use more often than not. If you live in a colder climate, your heated steering wheel is going to be a button off to the side, your lane tracing off to the right there, and then of course on the left is going to be opening your trunk. Just over our driver's head, we've got a lit vanity mirror and our extending sunshade, great for this Arizona weather. And even though we have the sunroof open right now, or the moonroof, excuse me, not always something you want to do, that's going to be a manual shade, so nice and easy to get to, but just know you'll have to do that one on your own. The controls, of course, for opening the moonroof are going to be up here in the center. That's going to be this button right here. And one thing you'll find normally up top in most other vehicles, but built into the touchscreen here, is going to be the MyQ garage door system. So you can connect up to 3 different garage doors and go ahead and open, close them. Of course, your garage door has to be compatible, but that's a nice feature to have in a vehicle in this price category because it does feel like a nice luxury. And if you're ever wondering if you left your garage door open, go ahead and click on the icon and you'd be able to check. Now to get this out on the road, and the first thing you'll notice is that, well, I'm not going to do a 0 to 60 run. 2 reasons. Where I'm at, really pretty, not enough room. The second reason is, the reason there's not enough room is there's not enough power to make it happen. 0 to 60 here took about 11 seconds, and that is not at our standard procedure. So the car's way down a little bit more. I don't know the elevation we're at, but here's what I can tell you. No matter how different our environment, this isn't going to get a whole lot quicker. And that was with putting the car in its new sport mode, not just eco driving the entire time. This is not particularly quick, but that is not what it's designed for. And even though the SR looks like that might be its intention, it's racier looking than it really is racy. And I don't mind that. There are some people who might be offended and say, hey, if it looks fast, it should be fast, and is it an imposter? And I don't think that's really it. If we had really big fins somewhere, and if we had huge wheel arches or dual exhaust or any of the other performance-oriented characteristics, I'd say, yeah, we really do need to be going a little bit quicker. But the reality here is, I think this is just a good-looking vehicle. And what it's really best at is cruising. And that is honestly kind of what we're doing here. These speed bumps, butter smooth as far as speed bumps go, especially in a vehicle that costs under $30,000, which is what you'll find most of those Sentras at, but don't worry, we'll cover that in just a few minutes. So let's get this out there where I think this really does shine, and that's going to be in your day-to-day commute. Yes, it looks sporty, but really it's comfortable. That is by and large the big takeaway here. This is quite comfortable and surprisingly quiet for what it is. And what it is an inexpensive vehicle. So yes, there's not as much money spent on things like noise isolation, but that little engine, unless you're working it, generally speaking, pretty quiet. And the cabin here is also honestly not a bad place to be. More insulated from the outside than I thought it would be, and I've driven some cars recently that were not this insulated. Nissan's also made some changes to the driving dynamics to make this more comfortable for you, the driver, at all times. Things like changing the dampener on the steering column here means that I should get less feedback, less vibration, that sort of thing from the road to me. And that one seems small, but does end up taking away some of the things that make driving a chore, tiresome. When you get at the end of your journey and you're tired, this should help eliminate some of that. And the suspension itself, also very compliant. Compliant may not be the word that everyone wants to hear when it talks about their suspension, but for me, all it is comfortable and easy to drive around and ready for a pothole. And it turns out, I don't know about you, but my commutes to and from the office are not particularly smooth. And this is a vehicle that I would say, hand over fist, is just one you should consider if that's what your daily route looks like. But where I think it starts to draw away from something like a crossover is going to be that it is lower to the ground. It does have a more direct feel in some of the steering components. And even though the SR is going to be the sportier version, it doesn't have any different components in that sense. This vehicle itself is just built to be kind of fun. You'd have to work it pretty hard, but that actually might be the most fun of it, is that if you want something out of this, well, you're gonna have to put your foot into it. But if you're out for a cruise, put it in eco mode. Let the engine stop-start do its thing. Save a few dollars on gas and enjoy the ride while you're here. Because the zero gravity seats that Nissan is famous for and loves to talk about do their job. We've been on the road for a few hours today and I have been plenty comfortable. And in an inexpensive vehicle, which really is what this is, that's often something that seems a little bit overlooked. And let's not forget that right now, I've actually got the Pro Pilot Assist on, and there are not a lot of entry-level vehicles that can do the level of driving assist that we're gonna find here. Not none, they are certainly available, but not all of them. So if you wanted to get a higher end trim, you just didn't need any more car, it doesn't feel like you have to sacrifice a whole lot of features. I've got a Bose sound system available, I've got Pro Pilot Assist, moonroof, garage door opener technology that, again, you just don't find in every vehicle out there, especially what some people might consider a bargain bin. This one, you do. I spent the majority of my day in the most expensive version of the Sentra, that's the SR with all the fixings. But expensive is a relative term these days. With the average price being over $50,000 for a brand new car, Nissan is looking to do something very different. The Sentra here, in every single trim level, from base S all the way to SL, will start under $30,000. And when I say the most expensive version, when I took off some of the accessories of this model, obviously those things you can do later, but things you can't change from the factory, this came out to a whopping only $30,645. I'm not saying that's nothing, but that does include destination. So just over $30,000 gets you a fully loaded Sentra. But if you want to spend less than that, don't worry, there are options. The S will start out at $23,645. At that point, you're getting that smaller screen, smaller wheels. It doesn't feel like it's going to be as premium of an experience and likely not worth saving, for me at least, about $800, because if you bump up to the SV, that's $24,415, which does get you the better screen and some better looking wheels and a number of features that you don't find at that low end, especially in terms of color. If you want color, you have to go to the SV. The SR starts out at $26,245, but of course there are a couple different options you can add, and most of them are going to be functional. So if you want the convenience package, that gets you more equipment like you'll find in the SL, and obviously that's a little bit more. But the SL itself starts out at $29,235. It comes one way, obviously pick your color, but no available options there. That means that this is an inexpensive vehicle that doesn't feel to me like you've gone to the bargain bin. And that's, I think, going to be a big thing for a lot of folks, because you don't want to feel like you're driving a cheap car at any point. And never on the road did I feel like this was cheap. There are things that it doesn't do as well as some of the competitors or obviously more expensive vehicles out there. I think it's racier looking than it's racier driving, but you know how often I race out on the road? I don't. I mostly spend my time commuting. I spend a lot of time on the freeway. I want a quiet, comfortable ride, and this has done it. And it feels like an SL even if you're not in an SL. At least that's sort of the persona. So an SL is going to feel, well, like it's right at home. The SR bits look great, and this is probably the direction that I would go. I would get the optional package to give me some more feature set, but I don't need to break the bank to do it. I like a sedan over a crossover specifically for driving dynamics. And even though I don't fit in the back seat as well of this as I would a crossover, I don't sit in my own back seat. So if I was looking to save a few bucks and I wanted something that didn't feel like I was saving a few bucks, the Nissan Sentra is a great way to do it. And these will be available on sale before the end of this year. So expect to see it before Christmas time, or if you want to get yourself a New Year's present, this might be one to make that list. Let me know down in the comments if there is something that this Sentra absolutely needs. I'll admit there are some things that it could have, but it would make it more expensive. And from there, the question is whether or not it's worth it, and ultimately, would people pay the difference? Or if there's a competitor that is hands down the one to get, I'd love to hear that as well. Obviously, there are gonna be some differing opinions. My expectations have been more than met with what the Sentra is doing for me today, but obviously we'll get it back home for some further testing, so stay tuned for that as well. If you wanna hear more about my Sentra drive, go ahead and check out our podcast, the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, here on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen. We often talk about our latest drives. You can also subscribe to the channel, become a member, get some merch at aoamerch.com. Lots of ways to connect to us. And if you have questions, reach out at hey@autobuyersguide.com. We usually feature those on our podcast. Thanks so much for watching, tuning in when we get this at home. Until next time, we'll see you down the road.